I'm going to begin and end my story with a sermon, and there's some things you need to know to understand this. First of all, in this story, my children and I are traveling, 3 of my 4 children are traveling to Seattle to be a part of a wedding of my brother Paul. And it's 1989, it's September. And in those days, long ago, 1989, if you got on the train, you had to use cash, all right? So know that, that's important for this story. And there were credit cards, but no such thing as debit cards. So you need to know that. And there were no cell phones. All right, so here we go. What, Larry? Oh yeah, yeah. So I grew up in a family where promises were kept most of the time, not all the time. So I learned to live with disappointments, promises not kept. And I thought, well, that's how life goes, right? And then when I was 20 years of age, I married this amazing man by the name of David Emery, who always kept his promises, always. We finished Seattle Pacific together. We had a baby. We went to graduate school together. We had another baby. We coordinated classes. We both worked. We had 1 car. We had to get over to the East Bay, Berkeley sometimes. We both, David was working at Ace Hardware in Larkspur. I worked for the Advanced Pastoral Studies office. My husband always kept his word and came back on time with the car. I could always trust him. It was awesome. And I asked him yesterday when I told him I wanted to tell this story. And I said, how come you were so good then? No, he still keeps his word. And he said, I did it because I felt God wanted me to. So this man I could always trust until a day in September in 1989 at the Amtrak Union Station in Denver. Leah, age 11, Adam 9, can we show slides? Ben 5 had taken the Amtrak, hold there, from Denver to Seattle to participate in my brother Paul's wedding. Some of you have met Tall Paul, my little brother, and his beautiful wife, Eileen, and my beloved nieces, Julie and Ann. So Leah and Adam, they're on your right. No, on your left. We're going to be acolytes, right? So they had to carry the light and the cross in this great big wedding. Cody is a cousin in the middle. So I had, as a parent, I had to, get them organized for this. And then another picture, our little Ben, who's 5, was going to be the ring bearer, all right? And not only did I have to coordinate that and all their outfits and all the pomp and circumstances, I had to be in the wedding as a matron. So here I am, all dressed up and decked out with Eileen and the other bridesmaids. Here's another picture of our family. Brother Paul in the middle, Joyce, Noel, mother and daddy, Iris and Adrian. It was an amazing occasion at Christ Episcopal Church in Tacoma, Washington. Big, big sanctuary, packed, lots and lots of pressure. And it was amazing wedding service. But this was a period of 1 week. We took the train, we did the service, and then we were taking the train back to Denver. So here we are getting on the train. I thought if I was showing pictures, I'd show pictures. So here's Daddy with us at the Puyallup Amtrak station, and my brother Noel and cousin Cody, and we're gonna get back on the train to make the 21-hour trip from Seattle to Denver. Okay, so then we're getting on the train. There we go. Isn't it funny the pictures you have in your collections? And we're on the train. Next slide. So we make this trip, and the last morning when we're arriving, I take my kids down to the dining car and I get them something to eat. But something in me says, Joyce, just eat a granola bar. Don't pay any money. You need a little bit of money left, so don't do that. So I fed my kids. We were ready, got off the train in Denver, got our luggage, went into the terminal. David wasn't there. Went out to the front where all the cars come in. David Emery wasn't there. David Emery is always there. He's always early. Where is he? And I was angry. And then I immediately became really worried. Where was David? So we waited and we waited. And you know how that fear sort of begins to grip your whole being and you get cold and you're shaky? And so we, as a family, circled up and began to pray. The children and I stood, held hands, and prayed to our God. And our prayer was interrupted by the loudspeaker saying, "Joyce Emery, please come to the ticket counter for a telephone call." Now, as human beings, we want to keep our word and our promises. We count on one another, don't we? If somebody says they're going to be there, we expect them to be there. This morning, we're back on the Mount with Jesus. And people are listening from across the Decapolis, people of every nation. But Matthew has written down this sermon for us and for Jews. And the Jews in the crowd are listening with the ears of Moses and the 10 Commandments and the promises that God made on the mountain to the people of Israel. They're reminded of Deuteronomy, the whole sermon, the whole book that Luke read just a portion of from chapter 10. Throughout that entire book, Moses is reminding the people of God's amazing promises made to them. And God says, I'm going to give you commandments so you can keep your promises to me. And if you break those commandments, you will experience suffering and pain and loss. This is retributional theology 101. Can you say that? Retributional theology. If you don't behave, you're going to be punished. Basically, that's the lesson. And Moses says in chapter 30, I have set before you life and death. Choose blessings, not curses. Please choose life. Keep your promises. And so Jesus not only upholds the 10 Commandments, guides for us to keep our promises to God and to one another, but Jesus adds new depths and new demands. He says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. We get that, right? But then he says, you have heard in ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, if you are angry with your brother or sister, you're liable to judgment. If you insult a brother or sister, you will be brought before the council, and that was the council of the church leaders. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the fire of hell. Jesus makes it even harder to live faithfully. And people from ancient days until now, he says, have come to the altar to find the Lord, to receive forgiveness and hope. But Jesus says, don't come. Don't come to the altar. If you remember that someone you know and with whom you are in a relationship has something against you, not that you have something against them, but they have something against you. Don't come to worship. Don't come to the altar. You go to them and you work with them to bring reconciliation. And when you're reconciled, come and worship and bring your gift. Jesus wants the laws and the love of God to permeate all of our being, our every attitude, our every relationship. He asks a lot of us. And you know, these are testy times. And there's anger and fear moving in our society and in our relationships. Even here as your pastor, some have come to me and said, I just can't believe so-and-so voted for so-and-so. I can't believe that they support that or this. I really love them, but I'm not sure I can be their friend right now. We need reconciliation in our families, amongst each other, with our dearest and nearest. And how do we find this? We find it by being honest with ourselves about who we are and what we believe. About being honest when we fail, when we sin, and seeking God's forgiveness. It's about loving ourselves and being true to the person God made us to be. It's about praying for ourselves and praying for others, especially those with whom you have an issue. And Jesus, in the next breath of his sermon, says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Love and pray for your enemies. What a Valentine that is. But that's what God requires of us. And Jesus wants us to work with one another, to keep our promises. And if we reach out and find that they're not going to work with us, then we've done our part. We've made the effort. And then Jesus goes on to say, where there is a charge, where there are courts involved, work it out before you go to the judge. Work on a settlement, make a plea bargain. Get it figured out before you get to the judge and the jury, for it will not pay for you to enter the court system. And I must admit that these directives that Jesus gave in the Sermon on the Mount have informed our entire judicial system. That's why we have plea bargaining and the issue of settlements. And there are times to go to court. There are times to sue one another. But proceed in a manner so that you can settle outside of court. You know, I've been a judicatory person who dealt with churches being sued all the time. All the time. I can't tell you how many times. Somebody tripped and fell on a crack in a sidewalk, and there was a suit against the church. Now, this was in New Jersey. This would never happen in Washington. Oh, yes, it would. Because we live in a sue-happy society. But when we follow Jesus, he says, don't do it. Work on reconciling yourself to others outside of the courts. And then concerning adultery, don't do it, says Jesus. But Jesus says more. He talks to the men in the crowd and he says, if you have looked at a woman with lust in your heart, you have already committed adultery. And I cringe because I watch Lady Gaga, do you? Jennifer Lopez? Faith Hill singing about football? I know Carrie Underwood is doing that now. Not as good as Faith Hill. But so many commercials that call us to lust. That's what our society does to us. I feel sorry for you men. But they do it to us too, as women. And Jesus says, don't. Don't. And I confess I'm a prude, but I'm working at it to be a better prude. And what's so amazing about these comments by Jesus is that we've been working with Shared Hope and dealing with anti-sex trafficking, and it's only in this decade that the states of this nation are beginning to put together laws that will persecute the perpetrator instead of the victim. Did you know that? Jesus taught this 2,000 years ago, and we're only finally getting this in the United States now. And then Jesus uses hyperbole to say it would be better to tear out your eye or to lose an extremity rather than experience the hell, the agony of a broken relationship, of divorce. And I must admit that I have never seen a divorce where there wasn't pain, ever, even an amicable divorce. And Jesus acknowledges in his sermon that divorce is allowed, but he puts tremendous pressure on the man to consider the various ramifications. And then Jesus moves to oaths. In the ancient times, if you swore to carry out a vow that you had made before the Lord, then you had better keep your word. No fudging. And if you didn't keep your word, there would be ramifications and you would suffer. It really was an if-then proposition. If you do this, there will be blessing. If not, curse. And when we look back at Deuteronomy and the words of Moses, Moses recounts throughout that entire book the promises of God. and the covenants that God has made with human beings, and God's ability to keep God's promises no matter what, and our inability as human beings to hold our word before one another and before God. Jesus says, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, because it is God's footstool, or by Jerusalem, the city of the great king. Do not swear by your own head. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Any more than that comes from the evil one. Jesus says, just speak the truth. In a courthouse, we're required to raise our hand and solemnly swear. Can we get the oath up there? And I don't know about you, but when I've been a witness on the stand, or when I've been in a jury and I raise my hand, I take this very seriously. And did you know that in the state of Washington, if you don't want to swear, you can say, I affirm. Because the courts have taken seriously what Christians have said. If you are not going to swear, you don't have to swear. Just tell the truth. And then I've had friends like you who have who were immigrants, who have chosen to live by the laws of this land, who have abided by the rules of visas, and carefully studied our U.S. Constitution and history, and chosen to become U.S. citizens. I've stood with them when they've taken this oath. This is a powerful oath about a commitment to a country and leaving behind another country so that you will serve and be faithful as a citizen of the United States of America. The oath ends on the next slide. As I've watched my friends take this oath, I've seen tears come to their eyes. And this morning we celebrate the Scouts of Troop 14 and our Venture Scouts and their service before God with us. They pledge with a promise and an oath. They don't swear. See what they pledge. And after they do this, they recount the Boy Scout laws together. And if you've been a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, you know what it means to take this oath, to live by these laws. And it is a powerful thing to hold one another accountable in a troop for this oath and the laws of scouting. And when somebody says they don't want to be a scout anymore and steps out of this, it's painful, isn't it? And when somebody's a part of your team and they step out, it's painful, isn't it? And when somebody's a part of your marriage and they step out, it's painful, isn't it? We try, but we break our promises to one another. We broke our circle of prayer, my 3 children and I, to hurry over to the Amtrak ticket counter. David Emery was on the phone. The ticket agent handed me the receiver. David told me that just north of Castle Rock on I-25, which is 50 miles south of Denver, over by the Air Force Academy, a huge female deer had leapt across the south lanes of I-25 over into the lanes of the northbound traffic. And this huge female deer had landed right on top of the hood of our Chevy Impala and destroyed it in one leap. The car was totaled, unable to be driven. David was fine, but he was shaken. Our 2-year-old son, John, was safe in the car seat in the back seat. The deer was dead. The tow truck had brought them both into Castle Rock to a convenience store. They were waiting for me to come and pick them up. How, I asked. You figure it out, said Dave. I'm praying for you. I passed the receiver back to the agent and thanked him for the call and paging me. And I went back to my children, and we formed again a prayer circle in that Union Station. And then I sat down and thought of a plan. And you know how children watch you when you're trying to figure stuff out? I can still remember their eyes just watching me. Remember, there were no cell phones and no debit cards. So I decided to go out to the front of the station with my children and all our luggage and hail a taxi. Wouldn't you know that I had exactly the right amount of cash needed to get us from downtown Denver to the airport, and that would be Stapleton Airport. And there, we used a credit card and rented a car, and we drove to Castle Rock, where we picked up David and John and took us all home 50 miles south to Penrose, Colorado. My dear husband, David, had tried to keep his word, but he couldn't. Life, a deer, a wrecked car got in the way. We make promises and oaths in marriage, in intimate love relationships, in our families, in our work. As citizens of this nation and world, you and I make promises and we fail. But God, through Christ, forgives us. And we learn through our life that it is only the God of all creation who always keeps God's promises. This morning you may feel lost, like everyone has broken their promises to you. You may feel as if your world is falling apart. Please know that the God of every nation, of every relationship, never breaks his promises to you and to me. Amen and amen.